Money is part of almost every decision you make, yet very few people understand how it actually works. In this episode, we're going to break down how money is created, why inflation never really stops, and why working harder often feels like it leads nowhere. If you want to understand the system clearly, not emotionally, not politically, but structurally, then you'll want to stay connected to this series. Subscribe and turn on notifications, not for frequent uploads, but so you don't miss the moments when something fundamental is explained. Now let's continue. Episode 2. Money is not what you think. Part 1. The truth about currency, debt, and control. Money feels familiar. You earn it. You spend it. You worry about it. It is present in almost every major decision you make. Where you live, what you eat, how secure you feel about the future. And yet, for something so central to modern life, most people have never been taught what money actually is. Not in school, not at work, not anywhere formal. You are expected to use it perfectly without ever understanding how it works. That is not accidental. The big misunderstanding. Most people believe money is a neutral tool, a reward for effort, a store of value. But money is not just an object. It is a system of permission. It decides who can act, who must wait, and who has options. When people struggle financially, they assume the problem is personal. But personal effort exists inside a monetary structure. And if you do not understand the structure, you will always feel behind, no matter how hard you work. Money before modern banking. Long before digital banking, money represented something tangible. Gold, silver, physical goods. It was limited by what existed in the real world. But modern money is different. It is not backed by physical scarcity. It is backed by trust and obligation. This shift changed everything. Because once money is no longer tied to something finite, it can be created. The moment money changed. Today, most money does not come from governments printing notes. It comes from banks issuing loans. When a bank approves a loan, it does not hand out money that already exists. It creates new money digitally, numbers appear on a screen, that money enters the economy. At the same moment, a debt is created. Money and debt are born together. This means the system does not simply reward work. It expands through borrowing. Why this matters? If money enters the system through debt, then debt is not a side effect. It is the engine. Entire economies depend on continued borrowing, continued spending, continued growth. If borrowing slows, the system tightens. Jobs disappear. Markets shake. Fear increases. So the system encourages participation, not understanding. The quiet shift in power. When money is created through lending, those who control lending shape the flow of opportunity. They don't need to control people directly. They control access. Access to capital. Access to time. Access to risk. And most people never notice this shift because money still feels normal, but normal does not mean neutral. In the next section, we will look at inflation, not as a mystery, not as a temporary problem, but as a predictable outcome of how money is created. Because once you understand inflation, you begin to understand why working harder often feels pointless. Part 2, inflation is not an accident. Inflation is often described as a problem, a temporary disturbance, a mistake that needs fixing. But inflation is not random. It is the natural outcome of a system where money is constantly being created. When more money enters circulation without a matching increase in real goods and services, prices rise. This is not corruption, it is mathematics. Why inflation feels invisible? Inflation rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive all at once. It moves quietly. A little more for food, a little more for rent, a little less left over each month. Because it happens gradually, people adapt. They cut small comforts. They work extra hours. They blame poor budgeting. By the time inflation is undeniable, the damage is already done. Purchasing power and time. Inflation does something subtle but powerful. It steals from the future. The money you save today buys less tomorrow. The hours you worked last year are worth less this year. This means time itself is quietly devalued. You are not just chasing prices. You are racing against a system that slowly erodes what you've earned. Why wages can't keep up. Wages move slowly. They depend on negotiations, budgets, approval, and competition. Prices, on the other hand, adjust instantly. This creates a permanent gap. Even when wages increase, they are often catching up to a past reality. This is why raises feel unsatisfying. You are celebrating progress that already expired. Who benefits from inflation? Inflation does not affect everyone equally. People with assets, leverage, and access to credit often benefit. Debt becomes easier to repay. Asset prices rise. Ownership compounds. People who rely only on wages absorb the pressure. Same effort, higher cost, less security. This is not unfairness by intent. It is inequality by design. The psychological effect. Inflation doesn't just change numbers. It changes behavior. It creates urgency, anxiety, short-term thinking. When the future feels unstable, people spend, not plan. And a system that depends on spending encourages that response. In the next section, we will explore why, despite working longer hours and gaining more skills, many people feel poor. Because effort alone is no match for a structure designed around debt and inflation. Part 3, the promise of hard work. Most people were taught a simple equation. Work harder leads to earn more, leads to live better. For a long time, this felt true. Productivity increased, wages rose, stability felt reachable. But over time, the equation changed, quietly, without announcement. Productivity kept rising. Technology made workers faster. Machines replaced muscle. Software replaced repetition. Automation removed limits. Workers today produce more value per hour than any generation before them. And yet, that value does not return to workers in the same way. This is not laziness. It is not lack of skill. It is redistribution. Where the extra value goes when productivity increases, someone benefits. But it is not automatically the person doing the work. The value flows toward ownership, capital, and scale. If you own the system, productivity multiplies your wealth. If you sell time, productivity increases your output, not your control. This is the difference between effort and leverage. Why work feels heavier if you are producing more, but receiving proportionally less. The system compensates. It increases pressure, longer hours, higher expectations, less security. Burnout becomes normal. Exhaustion becomes a badge of honor. People don't feel poor because they lack money. They feel poor because their effort no longer translates into progress. The shift from security to survival. In previous generations, work promised stability. Today, it promises maintenance. You work to stay in place, miss a paycheck, and consequences appear quickly. This creates fear-based loyalty, not to employers, but to income itself. A silent conclusion. When people say, "I work harder than ever and still feel behind," they are not complaining. They are describing reality, a system where effort is expected, but leverage is rewarded. In the final section, we will connect money, debt, and control, and explain why this structure persists. Because systems like this do not survive by accident. They survive because they are stable, predictable, and profitable for those at the top. Part 4. Money as a tool of direction. Money does more than facilitate trade. It directs behavior. When access to money determines housing, healthcare, education, and security, people adjust their lives around staying financially acceptable. This does not require force. It only requires dependence, and dependence is quietly encouraged. Debt as the expansion mechanism. Debt keeps money moving. It pulls future labor into the present. Student loans shape careers. Mortgages shape mobility. Credit shapes consumption. Each decision narrows options. Not immediately, gradually. The system does not restrict choice outright. It makes alternatives expensive. Why this system persists? This monetary structure continues because it is stable. It fuels growth, rewards. Ownership discourages disruption. Even during crises, the system is preserved. Losses are socialized. Gains are protected. This is not ideology, it is pattern. The cost of not understanding. Without understanding money, people misinterpret outcomes. They blame motivation, discipline, intelligence instead of structure. This creates shame, and shame is powerful. It keeps people focused inward instead of upward. A different question. The important question is not, how do I get rich? It is, what is this system designed to reward? Once you understand the answer, your decisions change, not emotionally, strategically. Money is not what you think. It is not just currency. It is not just reward. It is a system of incentives that shapes behavior at scale. In the next episode, we will move deeper into banks, debt, and long-term obligation. Because once money is created, it must be controlled. And that control has consequences. If this episode changed the way you think about money, it's because understanding creates distance. Distance from shame, distance from confusion, distance from blaming yourself for outcomes that are often structural. This series is about seeing the system clearly, step by step. If you want to continue that journey, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next episode explores banks, debt, and long-term obligation, and how control works quietly over time. Because once money is created, it has to be managed. And that management shapes entire lives. I'll see you in the next episode.